Hi, everybody, and welcome to our Demco webinar. We're so excited to have you here today for our second in this new series. And today we're going to talk about igniting a passion for nonfiction in our readers. So one of my favorite things to talk about, and I'm sure that all of you will love our ideas and hopefully have some things that you can take back to your classroom and to your library too. I am Shannon McClintock Miller, and I am a teacher librarian in Van Meter, Iowa. I also work with Future Ready librarians as their leader and a lot of other things too, but I have a passion for just finding great nonfiction for our readers, and it's so fun to be able to just think about all the ways too that I think nonfiction is changing. So I'm really excited to be here today.
Hi, I'm Brianna Kua. I'm a marketing consultant and the owner of Engage Media Solutions, and I'm excited to be here too.
So just a few friendly reminders. Our webinar is going to be around 30 minutes, and we're going to have time at the end for some questions. And also in about a week, you'll be receiving the slides and a recording of the webinar too. So today our webinar is going to explore how to ignite a passion for nonfiction with all readers. And we're going to uncover some effective strategies and innovative methods to bring nonfiction to life. To kick it off, we're going to start just by talking about the importance of sharing and celebrating nonfiction with our readers. And there are so many reasons why. When we think about nonfiction, and as I said a few minutes ago, I work with kids in preschool to 12th grade at my school. And I think about all the ways that we share and celebrate nonfiction with our readers and how it just fosters that knowledge that we want them to have about the real world, critical thinking, it builds vocabulary, sparks curiosity, and also I love that it just gives our readers a chance to connect to things that they love, that they're passionate about. The first thing is encouraging curiosity, and I'm sharing some of my kind of new favorite books too. If you guys haven't seen the Butterface books, these are great. There's two of them, and my kids absolutely love them. But on the slides, you'll see some that you might want to add to your list too. These are some that have been just really popular, and throughout the slides, I tried to do that, pull some that we have been loving at Van Meter. But when we think about just nonfiction encouraging curiosity, we know that nonfiction, they often tackle those topics that pique our kids' curiosity and really allows them to explore and learn about the world around them. The other thing is developing critical thinking skills. And I love this because by presenting facts and different perspectives in all these nonfiction books that we have, we give our readers a chance to take in that information and form their own opinions. Builds vocabulary and knowledge base. Last week we had media literacy. The week before that we had digital citizenship week. And I pulled a lot of books that, were nonfiction. They might have been picture books, or maybe they were a little longer, like a graphic novel, or even something that was nonfiction, maybe about computer science for our older ones. But I love this because it exposes them to new vocabulary, it makes them understand things a little bit deeper, and it really opens up the world to all of these new things that we want to give our kids an opportunity to learn about. Real world connections. One of, I think, my kids' favorite things to do is to come to the library and to tell me what they're hearing about in the world and what they want to read about. Of course, we have Taylor Swift and Simone. We just had the hurricanes. And so topics that our kids, that real life experience and those current events, of course, that they want, it gives them then a chance to connect to those things too. Supports research and inquiry. One thing that I had happen this week was some new articles in PebbleGo are how it is made. And when we were looking at these, tie-in that I made too were the series that Capstone has about like the story of ice cream, the story of French fries. And I love it when things like this happen because we give them then a chance that really opens up like this opportunity for them to dig a little bit deeper and investigate and just promote that active learning on topics that they already have in their life that they have might have maybe thought of, or maybe they've never thought before about, like how is a computer made? How are crayons made? The story of French fries. And so these opportunities are so great with nonfiction because it really does get them interested to even want to learn more. Promotes diverse perspectives. I think one of the greatest things about bringing nonfiction to our kids is that we give them that insight into different cultures and viewpoints. For example, we have Diwali coming up, and this starts this week. And so I shared a choice board yesterday with my kids, not only things that maybe they could research online or find, but even books and that we pair up with them that are in our library. And I put a link, you guys will get the slides afterwards too, but I put a link to this because this is something that you can make and make a copy of it and add your own links or things that you want to. But one that I wanted to point out is Google Arts and Cultures. They have this really cool place that you can actually go and color your favorite artwork too, for Diwali. So that is kind of a neat thing to be able to do. And even that, like pairing it up with that activity, promotes diverse perspectives too with our kids. And of course, one of the last things, and I think one of the most important aspects of bringing nonfiction to our students and our school community is connecting them to their passions. And this little girl a few years ago, she came to me and she was so passionate about rocks and minerals and gems, and we didn't have enough books. And so I got her a couple books and she was so excited. And it's one of my favorite stories to think about because I think about how much, that really means to our kids for us to listen to them, what they're passionate about, and then to connect them to things. If it's rocks and minerals or making and crafts or cooking, anything that they are interested in, to make sure that we connect them to our passions through nonfiction too. So all of these things, they come together to foster that love of learning and deep understanding of the world around them. And we know that nonfiction can empower our kids to be curious and informed readers by giving them this access to not only information, but that we give them access to this in really like fun, meaningful, creative, and engaging ways too. So I'm going to now share just a few ideas on how to connect our readers to nonfiction within our library and classroom. And we think about this a lot at my school, and we want to make sure that we're really creating a nonfiction rich environment. And if it's in our library, how we're, thinking about how we're showcasing different books, maybe it's STEM books, or maybe we have a great display on the history, or we use like the end cap of one of our shelves and we make one about making, like anything we can to make sure that the kids are seeing these things and that they know that we have all these different, nonfiction genres that we might have. Another thing is just experimenting with how we're shelving our nonfiction. And one thing that we did a few years ago is we started putting our like early chapter books into these little plastic bins that I just bought at Walmart. And we then, it was such a success, started doing it in our nonfiction. The great thing about it is we can change this out. We can rotate them. Maybe it's a special event or something is coming up like the election and voting, or maybe it's a holiday. And so we can then rotate too and then highlight things and experiment with that shelving. Another thing that we did a few years ago is we wanted to have, our nonfiction really stand out more. And so these little plastic shelf markers are really helpful because it gives us a way to just highlight those things a little bit more, what's on the shelf, and to celebrate those different genres in a really nice way for our kids to be able to find the things they want. As I think too about our new library that we're building at Van Meter, I got a sample of these great shelf markers that Demco has, and so we've already put this on our wish list for our new library. But I'm excited because I think that how we think about, when our kids come into the library and seeing something visual or reading is a great way to just really get our kids not only interested in things that they want to read, but maybe things that they haven't thought about reading before too. Also showing off nonfiction through book talks, displays, and featured displays in the library classroom and throughout the school. And I have a lot of pop-up libraries around our school, and so the purpose of these a lot of times is to get great nonfiction in front of our kids. Maybe it's books about celebrating Hispanic Heritage Month, and some of them also might be fiction, but a lot of them are nonfiction books and narrative nonfiction that we have found, things about voting and elections. And these little pop-up libraries are a great way just again to get more nonfiction in the hands of our kids and in the classrooms. Also collaborating with teachers and librarians to create exciting and meaningful cross-curricular connections with nonfiction. Probably one of my favorite things to do is to visit our classrooms and to hear what our kids want to learn about. And so I spend a lot of time, bringing them books that maybe that they want to use, or maybe they have a project they're doing in the classroom. Maybe it's something that they want to bring home even, and then really thinking about like how we can embed just great nonfiction into topics. For example, science and STEM, great way to get nonfiction tied into these topics, not just having our kids read things that maybe they're finding in a database, but we're so lucky now because there's so many great books that are written about these topics that we want to, tie into what they're doing in science, for example. And so this last week, I had one of our fourth grade teachers, she asked me if I would put something together because the kids wanted to learn more about sea turtles and how like plastic bags and straws were affecting them. And so putting this together, finding the book One Turtle's Last Straw, and then just finding things like webcams, Pebble Go and Pebble Go Next articles, books, anything I could to bring that together. But then even tying that into, we're going to have an educational program with the Sea Turtle Rescue and Rehabilitation Center in North Carolina. So bringing that all together, but really tying that in with that great nonfiction too. Same thing with social studies. This is another fourth grade. We can, a lot of things that we do and how we bring nonfiction revolves to around social studies. There's so many great narrative nonfictions now that are saying, maybe telling a story about a biography, an historical event. And this one was just a country choice board. But then again, thinking about like how we can tie in books from our library, how we can tie in ebooks, and then bringing that all together to support our teachers and our kids in our classroom too. And I've mentioned a lot about like narrative nonfiction, and I think one of the coolest things that has happened in just publishing in the last few years are all the great books that are being written about like biographies and just stories that are great nonfiction picture books. And so I have a real passion for finding these and bringing these stories to our kids because we wouldn't hear a lot about them, like there's this one called Cut, and it's the story of scissors, like all these stories that are just really interesting facts that the kids love, but beautifully illustrated books too. And so these are great to use with all of our readers, even with our high school and our middle school kids too. We also know that access to nonfiction matters, and print and digital nonfiction is essential in igniting that passion within our readers and our community. We've talked about our pop-up libraries, and one thing that we also do with these is we have book clubs for our kids in our elementary. But it's not just fiction that they're also reading nonfiction. And you can see at the top and at the bottom of this big bookshelf is there's big sets too of really interesting high interest like nonfiction books that the kids can also have in their book club. We think about ways too that we can highlight those books that make up our collection, and we can do this in Destiny. And we also do it in a Google Slide presentation that we started last year. And every time we add a new book, we add it to these Google Slides. And when the kids then go to that, or the teachers, they can see all of the great like nonfiction that is being added to our collection. And I love this because it's a great snapshot too, not only for our kids, but for our teachers to really know what is in our library and what is being added. And so just a really fun, easy way to highlight some of that great nonfiction that's being added as well. And we also want to make sure that it's like out there, that we're supporting not only are kids reading, like if it's chapter books or graphic novels, but again, that nonfiction. And I always make sure that I'm highlighting our databases and our ebook platforms and anywhere that our kids can get to where they can also read or find if they're at school or in the library or at home. And so this is the front page of our library site. And it's just, again, a Google slide that is embedded, but they can click on our ebooks, our research, they can click on our databases, and they can find the things and that they want to, if it is around nonfiction or fiction, whatever they want to read. Another great thing is to make sure that ebooks are part of your library and your classroom collections. And we use Capstone Interactive for our ebooks, but I love that there's a nonfiction category, because when they click on that, then they can go into all the nonfiction that we have, and they also can even go a little deeper and find books like on animals or health or social studies, science, whatever they're looking for, and dig a little deeper on what they want to find. But when I'm thinking about, our books that we have in the library, but especially those books that we have that are ebooks, giving nonfiction a special place within your library programming and events throughout the year is a really nice way to highlight that nonfiction too. And one thing that I do every month is I create a virtual book hub. And I love this because I can share books that are great like read alouds, but I can also share books that are really great nonfiction stories. Maybe it's something to do with a season or a holiday or a person that we want to highlight. And so this is something every month I just pull from those ebooks that I just shared from our Capstone Interactive ebook platform, and then I tie them into this choice board. But I also make sure it's part of our book hub too. And when you look at this, you can see that there are several that are just great nonfiction. Maybe it's exploring AI, or a story about, a glacier, or a story about the eagle and fireflight, like anything I can to have the teachers also sharing books that are really just great nonfiction too. And one of my favorite places to find like special events or things that I want to pull from these calendars are the Demco calendars. And I was so happy because November, I found it today, and there is a link in here, but this is a great way too to find special things then that you can tie in and then pull that out when you're thinking about nonfiction. And so it's picture book month in November, another great way to tie in just really great picture books too. Fun ways to ignite a passion for nonfiction in our readers. And I think it's so much fun. And in the next webinar in November, we're going to talk a little bit more deeply about some of these ideas too. But the first one is just nonfiction challenges and special event activities. And when I see things like this, I bookmark them, and these are ideas that either we've done already at Van Meter or that I want to do. I would love to do something like this Read Around the World challenge. And We've done this before when we used to do a lot of connections with like classrooms using like Skype, and it actually is something that Skype used to do when they connected people and different classrooms. But this is so great because on this you could even pull out books or even authors and have your kids, read books around the world. March Madness nonfiction, I saw this idea recently and I thought this was genius. And so we did series last year, but this is something I would love to do this year for our March Madness. Using technology to ignite a passion for nonfiction with our readers. And we use a lot of technology to do that. A lot of times the nonfiction is that springboard that we need when we're using technology. When we hatch chicks, for example, in the springtime, it might be a nonfiction book or something that we kick off that learning with. And even tying it into our Merge Cube, they first learn in the nonfiction book. Maybe it's from a choice board, and then they use the Merge Cube to even follow along with the chick as they are hatching. And another thing is, I love this example from one of our kindergarten rooms, and they use the book From Tadpole to Frog from Scholastic, but then the Merge Cube was, that technology that they use. So a lot of times, again, it's not just from the library, but the teachers too using nonfiction as a springboard. Also bringing nonfiction topics to life with technology. When our kids in kindergarten were learning about biographies and famous Americans, they did a little research. They used books that we had in our library, and also they researched using PebbleGo. But then they animated their characters and used a report. We used animated drawings in Canva to bring that learning to life. And so anything that we can think of, what they're learning and getting excited about, but then using that technology as that vehicle to make sure that they're sharing that too. This is a great one. We're doing this week at Van Meter, but also thinking about like pairing up nonfiction and ebooks and databases. So a lot of times a project might be, maybe it starts with like a picture book, and we back it up with like some nonfiction from a book or even a database, and then a project coming together. But I love this because I think it really brings that meaning, and it gets the kids so excited about what they're learning about. And so this is something too that's from my blog that you guys can use too. That's a great one. And then this was such a fun one, and this actually uses Stick Together. And so I'm going to share like where you can get this too from the Demco site. But one thing that our second graders did one year is they were learning about gardens, and they were learning about like plants and vegetables and flowers. And so we used some books that we had, we used some ebooks, some things that we had too, like nonfiction that were from their science unit, and then pulled it together where they used Capstone Create to create their own stories. But then they also created a community garden from that nonfiction book using just the pixel art class pack. And so much fun to see what they did. You can order these two from Demco, and I love this because those are actually our kids in this project, what they did and how they created that too. Another thing I love to do is to kind of gamify nonfiction, and I use like Kahoot and Gimkit a lot to create like little trivia games over things that they might be learning from books. And also I love using Breakout EDU to go there and find like, maybe it's a book about America, or it's a book about like the election or something, and then pairing it up too, kicking it off with a really great nonfiction book is a fun way to do it. One too that I love to use, and I use this actually when we create games in Bloxels, because the kids are actually creating games, or even in Breakout EDU when they're creating games, Pass, Go, and Collect 200. A great nonfiction. It's the real story of how Monopoly was invented. So that was a good find a few years ago. And also, again, including student voice and choice. And when we think about our kids and, we're talking to them about what that they really love, or something that they maybe they've went on a trip, or it's something that a family member is an expert on, or something that they love to do. They love recommending great nonfiction books to our friends and to our teachers. And it's something that I think we need to remember. It's not just those fiction books that they're reading, but the things that kids are really, I had a little girl last week and she checked out like a cooking book, a cookbook, and she wanted to recommend like something that she had made from it. And so remembering to encourage them to also recommend nonfiction topics and also titles, even asking them like, what would you like to see that we don't have? I think that's a great one, kind of like the rocks and minerals and gems that the little girl wanted. And it was so fun to hear. We got a vending machine last year at the end of the year, and so we've been filling it up this year with lots and lots of books. But on our second round of books, I asked a lot of the kids, like, like what was missing? What would you love to see? And of course, one of them was Taylor Swift, and one was nonfiction. And so on the second round of getting books and filling it up, we made sure that we had lots of nonfiction in our vending machine. And so kids, they do love, not only to read it, but to recommend what they want to. Also, ask your teachers to recommend nonfiction. And this is a little paper that I just made in Canva. And we put these into books for our staff picks. And so kids love to see those. And you can find that link in here too, where you can just print them off yourself. But ask the teachers, what they're reading. Maybe it's something that is from their curriculum or something that they've used in their classroom. But a lot of times I love hearing that, because then we can add it to our library too. And nonfiction can be something just what our kids need. And this is a great story that supports this. We have a little guy in first grade who absolutely loves space. And so the teacher asked me last week to create just a choice board just for him, that he could go and he could explore nonfiction books or articles about space. But sometimes, that's exactly what they need, is a place to go where they know that we've listened to them and that we're supporting, their needs too, in something that they're really passionate about. And I think that that's one of the best things about bringing great nonfiction to our kids, is that it really opens that door for them to be able to connect to what they're passionate about too. And I always love to, again, think about this story. And as we thought about all these ideas today, to think about, those kids that come to us and want the things that they're passionate about, or that they've learned about, or maybe that we don't have. And so just think about that, and think about the rocks and minerals when we are supporting, our kids and our readers. So a few resources for igniting a passion for nonfiction. Probably one of my favorite books is 5 Kinds of Nonfiction by Melissa Stewart. And I absolutely love everything that she writes too. Whale Fall, one of the most beautiful books probably in the last few years that I've gotten for our library, but she does such a great job. Anytime that she has a blog post or a webinar, I would highly recommend buying this book and just following along all the great things that she does with nonfiction, and especially with science too. Kidlit TV, they have a lot of great things that are around nonfiction. I love this blog post about just nonfiction books that we all need. And again, a lot of narrative nonfiction, picture books, and just stories that are really, really great. And then one thing I wanted to include too was this podcast choice board that I made. And I use this a lot when my kids are, especially if maybe they've read like all the things that we have about space, like the little guy that wanted all the books on space that we had. It's a great way then to tie in a little bit more like nonfiction or true stories, or things that they might, want to learn about just going one step further. And so you might be able to find something too for tying into that great nonfiction that you're bringing. And these are all from GZM shows, and so great for all learners, and you can get to that link too. But I wanted to put a link to my blog, The Library Voice. I share a lot about like nonfiction and a lot of things that we're doing at my school around choice boards and nonfiction books. I love sharing too on my Instagram things that we're getting and things that I might find. You can also subscribe to my newsletter where Brianna actually and I do this, and Bree does such a great job. And so this comes out every week, and you can subscribe to that too. But as you can see, and as you know, there's so many ways to ignite a passion for nonfiction within our readers, within the library, classroom, and throughout the community. And I'm excited because this is just the first part of one that we're going to do in November, and I can't wait. I hope that you guys share ideas with us too and just have so much fun celebrating nonfiction with your readers. But we're gonna spend just a few minutes on questions, and so I'll let Brianna tell us if there's some questions that she'd like to have us answer.
There aren't any yet, but I'm sure some will pop up.
I know, I have, after doing this webinar, I have a giant list of even new books that I have found. And so I hope that you guys got a lot of ideas and just great things that you could do with nonfiction too.
We're getting a lot of thank yous. Oh, we do have a question from Jenny. She says, do you have a post on how to create podcast choice boards for elementary?
Yes, there's actually a link in that slide um, that goes along with that. And you don't even have to, you can actually just like use that choice board if you want to and make a copy. And so that is linked in the slides too.
And Megan asked, what if we don't have Pebble Go? Can we do the choice boards and fall it?
Sure, you can just make like a copy of it, and then you can pull any links or covers of books or anything that you want. So if it is another database or different ebooks, don't reinvent the wheel. Just make a copy, and then you can change it up for your kids too.
Carrie asks, what resources do you use to find your nonfiction book selection?
That is a great question. So I look at Instagram a lot. I look at like School Library Journal. I love to go to Tidal Wave and look at the new books, and they do a great job of highlighting like this week there was like a list on Tidal Wave of like 800 of kind of the new books, and you can even break it down into like just nonfiction for a certain grade level. And I also love to go to like any kind of bookstore I can. I think bookstores do a really good job, especially lately, like highlighting some of these great new, especially when it comes to like narrative nonfiction picture books and stuff. So that is really helpful too. And then I ask the teachers, I find that like our reading curriculum is doing a really good job of pairing like nonfiction with our fiction, what the kids are reading. And so I make sure to really pay attention to that and ask our teachers too what is being highlighted. And sometimes they're older books, but ones that maybe we've forgotten about or that we can find something that is similar. And so that's kind of fun too to see those books. But it's definitely something that is really fun to watch, like all the things that are being published now, and just kind of an exciting time for, I think, nonfiction.
Kyle asked about, he said that you spoke specifically about the Melissa Stewart's 5 types of nonfiction, and he had a couple questions. The first one is this something that your whole school has adopted? How have you shared it with your teachers?
Yeah, so our curriculum at Van Meter is our reading curriculum is actually focused around fiction and nonfiction. And so even though, like Melissa Stewart, I have shared this book, but our curriculum isn't based around her book. But I have shared it, and I try to like always think in my head, like when teachers come to me and they're asking me if it's a question like around science or social studies or something, I'm always trying to think like how we can, get in great nonfiction or even something that is fiction too, right? Like something that we can support and get our kids excited about learning. I find sometimes that especially with like social studies and science, it's a great opportunity for us to tie in those kinds of nonfiction that Melissa talks about in her book, or even things that she's writing like her great science books, but just trying as like the librarian to, always think about how we can support and how we can really get some of this great nonfiction too into our classrooms and our library, of course, as well.
And this is the second part of his question. He said that he's heard of librarians labeling nonfiction books with those categories, and he's asking, how do you do that or suggest it, and how do you teach the 5 types to students?
Yeah, that is a great, my books are not labeled that way in our library. I have heard of that too, and I would actually love to see a library that does use that. I love her book, and I use it more of kind of a guide for me to just really help me, like when I'm helping the teachers or even selecting books for our library. But that's a great question. I mean, that's something that I would love to see too. And that I'm thinking. I've read her book actually a few times, and I keep it handy and have shared copies with our teachers at my school, and that's something that I find to be really interesting when libraries do that.
Paula asks, do you see the rotating bins of featured nonfiction topics as a compromise between genreifying the collection and not? What are your thoughts on genreifying nonfiction?
So our collection has been genreified for a long time. We got rid of the Dewey, like, well, a little fact, Brianna is my daughter, and Brianna, when I think you were a senior, Bree, and so that
Yeah.
was like probably 12, 13 years ago that we actually genreified all of our nonfiction at our school. And so it's great because I think one of the reasons that I do like the pop-up libraries and even like the bins is just to highlight, things like I said that are special or going on, but you totally could do that even if you weren't, genreified yet. One thing I started with when before we genreified was I would do that in our fiction and our nonfiction, like in our graphic novels, for example. I'd pull those out and put them in bins, or if it was a special holiday. And so I've always done that, just not in those little bins. Like maybe I had a special place where I could pull them out and put them in a special bookshelf or on like an end cap or at the top of a shelf. And so I think that that's a great way to do that, even if, your collection isn't genreified yet. But even if it is, a great way still to highlight those things too.
Sonda asks, how do you manage the library book pop-ups around your school?
So that's a great question. It actually is very easy. We have had no problems with like being able to manage that. The books that are on those pop-ups are for our teachers to come and borrow, or if the kids see something that they really want to check out, they can come and ask us to check it out. But we really don't have that because our teachers are pulling them and using them in their classrooms. And it's funny because when we first started that, and it's been, I don't know, probably like 5 years now that we started that, all these little pop-ups. But I was a little worried too when we started, like how we were going to manage, like, were they going to disappear? Were kids going to pick them up? And we actually haven't had any troubles because I think everybody appreciates them so much, and it's such a helpful tool for us to have. And then we have one teacher, one of our fourth grade teachers, that she actually has her kids like dust the shelves for us. So that's really helpful because they get a little dusty when they're in the hallways. And so it's really been a great thing. And I don't check them out. Like when I pull them from the collection, I, say that they're down in that, area, and then we put them back at the end of the month or the end of that period or whatever it might be. But it's worked out really, really well, for us to have these. And actually, they're renovating some of our school and building on a big part. Like I think it's like 28 new classrooms, and we're getting the library and a new activity center. And the architects, I was so happy because they noticed these pop-up libraries as they were, walking and looking at our school. And last year when we saw the plans, they even worked those into the new plans. There'll be like permanent shelves in the hallways for some of those pop-up collections. So I'm glad that they saw those because it really has worked great for our school. And it's just a nice way to get our library not just in the walls of our library, but kind of throughout our school even more too.
And then the last question we have right now, it's not really a question, but Steve was saying that they genreified their nonfiction with the 5 types. And it was a bit of work, it's a bit of a work in progress, but the kids really gravitate to the narrative nonfiction section.
Hmm. They do. And I think it's just so fun. That's one thing that I have kind of on my goal list this year is because ours right now is kind of throughout our collection, and it's something that, I kind of like think about when I look at like our biographies, for example, and there might be a great book about, I don't know, space or something. And I always wonder, like, do I need 2 copies of that? Or like, how do we, even, I don't know, celebrate and make sure that our kids know even more? So that's so cool. And it's something that I love to like read about and see what people share. And we're just so lucky that everybody's doing all these great books that are narrative nonfiction.
That's the last of our questions.
Those are some good ones. Thank you, everybody. And I
Sure.
wanted and thanks, Bree. We wanted to also share our upcoming webinar. This is November 21st, and we're going to dig in a little bit farther on ways to make nonfiction a star in your library and classroom. And so I'm excited about this because I know that some of you probably have, and you did have some questions about some of the ideas we talked about today. And so this is going to be really great because we're going to dig in a little bit further and even show you some things about like choice boards and our pop-ups and things that we've done project-wise. And so it's going to be a great time, and we'll have lots of time too to kind of break that down, but lots of times too for questions and hopefully some sharing from all of you too. So we hope that you come to that too. That's going to be a good one. Crazy to think it's going to be the end of November almost then. You can also scan for the slides here or at that bit.ly. You'll be able to find them too. And as we said, the links and stuff from, if it's like, for example, about the podcast, you'll be able to find that in the slides. But if you can't, please feel free to reach out. I'm always happy to help. And if you have any questions, we're happy to try to find the answer for you and get you what you need. So feel free to reach out if you have questions after this too. But thank you so much for joining us. We hope that you just have a great week. I hope that you guys added some titles to your book list and that you found some ways to ignite a passion for nonfiction within your readers too. But we're grateful that you came and we can't wait to see you in November.
Thank you.